your loans are illegitimate. That means your bank loans, your car loans, your credit card loans, any corporate loan that you have is illegitimate. And I know for the American people, we like to pay our debts. But what I'm attempting to say right now is that our entire financial system is built on a basis of fraud. The financial system from its early beginnings was built on a basis of fraud by the original fraudsters, the banker class. The banker class figured out this scam early on, and they built the foundations that we live on today. That is our financial system that keeps you debt enslaved in perpetuity. And you'll hear all the financial gurus and they'll tell you, you got to pay down your credit cards, you got to pay down your loans. But the banker class is ready for that. And they know that you don't have a chance of paying off this debt because the system is rigged. It's rigged against you. I am a child of the 1970s. And in the 1970s, we did not run our country on lending. We didn't do it. We didn't have credit cards. We didn't have payday lenders. But here today, every facet of our society is built on one form of a loan or another, and it only perpetuates. It only gets bigger and bigger and bigger to a point now that when you want to go out and buy a hamburger at the local restaurant, you got to put it on a credit card. It's a loan, even for just a simple meal at a restaurant. And why? Again, it's because the banker class built the system. They built the system so that you are a gerbil on a wheel in perpetuity, forever. You're a gerbil on a wheel trying to pay off these loans. You are debt enslaved, and they sit back. They sit back, the fat cats that they are, and they count the cash. While you work and work and work, the banker class counts and counts and counts. And this fraud, this scam, it started in the early European villages, the villages, 1,000 plus years ago, when there were kings and queens and villagers. And what the villagers did was they would, at that point in time, they would have their currency. They would do trade in hard currency. In other words, they would have silver coins. And the silver coin, each one of them would have a stamp on it. And that stamp would correlate to the exact weight of that silver coin. And so what all the villagers were doing, they had these bags of coins and they'd go around and they do trade with this coins. It was the best form of trade at that time. And what happened is there were these traveling salesmen, these con artists, these snake oil salesmen. They're called the banker class. And the banker class would come to the village and they'd court the king. And they tell the king, we're the financiers, we're the money men. And we have this new novel idea where what you do is we keep all of your coins and we keep them safe and we give you a note so that you don't have to carry around these big sacks of coins. We take a note and we put a notary on there, a stamp, and it says exactly the weight of the coin that we're holding. We give you the note and it's a perfect correlation. No funny business. Everything's on the straight and up. And the Europeans, the villagers, they loved it. They loved the idea. And what they did is they gave the banker class all of their coins, all of them. And they took these notes and they're out doing their exchanges in the day. But see, what the banker class didn't tell the villagers, is that they were printing an extra note. For every note that they gave to the villager, they gave one to themselves. It's called fraudulent. It's called a fraudulent scam. And what they would do, it's called, I don't know, forgery, but it's not lawful. And so what they do is they keep it. And so what happened is all the villagers, they'd all have their paper notes, and the banker would have the most paper notes of any villager. He'd be, without lifting a finger, without doing a single ounce of work, he'd be rich to the heavens. But what happened is that there began to become bubbles in the local village, right? So in other words, all of a sudden there was too much cash in the village, and things started to bubble up. Like, for example, a muffin or a loaf of bread, or if you go to the cobbler to get your shoes fixed, things became too expensive. And after some time and after some deducing, the villagers figured out, hey, wait a minute, it's the banker. The banker's creating these funny money and he's stealing from us because he's creating these fraudulent notes. So what they would do is they'd confront the banker and the banker would have to leave town, right? He'd have to leave town and he'd go to the next village and he'd perfect the scam on the next set of victims, and it would just perpetuate from there. That's how our financial system got its roots. But you see, the banker class got really, really sophisticated, smart. And what they did is they took it to another level. What they did when they eventually got to this village, the United States, what they did is they began to employ the intellectual class. They'd pay off the Harvards. They'd pay off the Harvard professors. They'd pay off the New York Times writers. And they would write articles or they'd profess in their classrooms about how intelligent the banker class is, how smart, how wise, and how smart. Even though these fraudulent schemes may not seem smart, they're actually smart. It was this like sort of intuitive argument that the intellectual class would do to help their friends, the bankers, get their frauds off the ground. So what they did is they write their newspaper articles and so on and so forth. And the banker class, the people would then accept these banker class fraudulent schemes, and they became the norm. And ultimately, what happened is it is an official practice. It's done by all of our banks. It's called fractional reserve lending. Go look it up. You go look it up on Wikipedia or whatever. They'll only tell you how brilliant it is and how it's necessary and all of this other nonsense. But it's a scam. And it's just one of the scams that the bankers have. And what fractional reserve lending is, it is the banks literally saying that they can reprint a dollar up to 15 times. And it just multiplies and multiplies. And that's why the banker class gets rich while you are a gerbil on the wheel paying off your debts. You are debt enslaved. You see, the banker class, when they set up this foundation of fraud, what they did is, the early bankers was a man named Bernard Baruch, or it was maybe his partner in crime, Jacob Schiff, in the early 1900s. And what they did is they went to this criminal senator named Nelson Aldrich, and they basically paid him for the scam. They paid him, and he got all the laws passed. What that did is that gave the banker class the golden printer. The golden printer. They don't do any work. They just paid off the political class to get the golden printer so they can print and print and print. It becomes law. They pay off the New York Times. They pay off the Harvards, and this scam just grows. Now, they've gotten this scam so far in our heads that the idea that I'm going to propose right now seems out of reach. And when I propose it, people are going to say, yeah, Chris, that's a great idea, but it's just not doable. It is doable. All things are doable. Man is a resilient being. But this is the concept of how things should happen. Basically, what should happen is every unit of currency, every dollar should be stuck to a precious metal, right? So every unit of currency, if it's a dollar or whatever, it should be correlating exactly to a unit of gold or a unit of silver. And the measurements, the weight of that gold or silver should be the exact match of what's printed on that dollar or that unit of currency. And no funny business, right? No funny business. Like, let's get a real legal system in place that prosecutes funny business, that prosecutes the criminal class, that prosecutes the banker class, so that we all get free. We all liberate. That's what needs to happen. See, the thing is, but here's the problem if that happens. If we actually liberate ourselves, that means that the banker class, they have to go to work, and they don't like to work. They like to print. They like to put their money on the button and print, but they don't like to work. But I think this American would like to see the banker class go to work. I'd like to see them work in the fields like I did as a child, working on the Black Angus farms in Pennsylvania. I like to see them do that kind of work, because the truth is that there is nobility in work. There is a good sense of being that comes from work. And so everybody needs to do it, but not work to get out of debt enslavement like the banker class wants us to do. And so this is the Chris Heasley Show. And on this show, we're going to give you all the ideas, the content, the information that you need to take back your cities, your countries, your town. And what I'm doing right now is I'm actually projecting to you a national phenomenon, a national idea, something that's not being carried out by your local officials. But you see, that's still not the point. The point is, it is your local officials that should be tackling this issue first. And we had one here for a long time. His name was Ron Paul, Congressman Ron Paul, out of Galveston. He was the one-man band trying to take on this effort against what's called the Federal Reserve, which is a private bank. I want to make this clear. The Federal Reserve is a private bank. They prop it up as if it's a governmental institution. It's not. Just like Federal Express is a private company that does shipping, the Federal Reserve is a private bank owned by the European billionaire class, owned by a set of Europeans, and it's what keeps us all enslaved. And what Ron Paul did is he tried to take on that Federal Reserve, but he was outmanned, outgunned. But he did clear the path for us today to begin calling our local representatives and confronting them with this concept, confronting them with debt enslavement. You know, we have all of our local county Democrats, and they all purport to be the saviors of the little guy, the defenders of the little guy. Well, where are our local Democrats taking on the Fed? Has any local Democrat even uttered the words debt enslavement? No, because our county Democrats, our Texas Democrats, they are a partner organization to the leftist organization that is the Federal Reserve. But you know what? Today in Fort Bend County, we have a new Democrat chairman. I believe his name is Fred Taylor. I apologize if I got that name wrong. Look him up. Anyways, I don't get everything right, but his name's Fred. I know that. And he is the Fort Bend County Democrat chair, and he's brand new. He's in. And this is the opportunity. So what we want to do is we want to call Fred now and ask him to take on the Fed. Ask him to follow in the shoes of Ron Paul. Ask him to begin mouthing the words debt enslavement so that we take on the cabal that is enslaving all of us. Because everything appears that your Texas Democrats are actually a partner organization to the billionaire class, to the cabal. So now's the time. Call a Texas Democrat, call your county Democrats, and challenge them to take on the Federal Reserve and debt enslavement, the issue of our day, the issue of our times. And on today's show, we have two guests, and I hope I got both of them on. One guest is G2. G2, are you on the line?
I am.
Oh, good, man. I was really nervous about the phones not working because we've had some glitches, but I'm glad you're on the line. And in the studio, we have Nathan Heasley. Now, I'm going to give a short introduction to Nathan Heasley. Because Nathan Heasley, what he's done is he is a follower of a man named Charlie Ward. And Charlie Ward has an idea that is very far-reaching, and it almost seems surreal, but it seems to continue to substantiate itself. And what Charlie Ward is suggesting is that there is a new financial system that is coming, that we are in the midst of a political change, even though the Democrats appear to have the driver, appear to have the steering wheel, they're behind the driver's seat. At the same time, under the radar, there is a subsurface momentum growing for change, for real change. And Nathan Heasley is here to talk about it. So Nathan, I give you the floor, man. Let me know. What do you think about my monologue? What are you here to talk about? The floor is yours.
Well, thanks, Chris. Chris is full of energy and give it to you straight, like always. So great monologue, man. Yeah, so I followed Charlie Ward for about 4 years now. He's just a normal dude that started, he had a business, he owned a bunch of hotels, and he actually helped to help other businesses that had money that they wanted to get into the banks. And he did it all the time because he had a lot of cash with hotels, so he helped them. And then he started helping a lot of people with a lot of money do that. And he would be flying all over the world helping people. And he'd hear things going on in the world. And that's how he started. And so Charlie is he follows what is coming, what's called the quantum financial system or the BRICS system. And it's very different than what Chris is talking about. We're going to a better system. And not only going, it's actually in place already. And so what is that? It's not fractional banking. It's the opposite. It actually has resource-backed currencies. So when I say resource, different parts of the world have different resources. So they're going to use what they are strongest with. So the U.S. is going to be silver and gold. Saudi Arabia is going to be oil. Africa is going to be diamonds. So you get the idea. So it's going to be resource-backed currencies. And this is, and there's so much more than that. We're just talking about the currency today. But at the end of the day, what we have on this world is really just good versus evil is what's going on, right? And so we are getting rid of the people that are been evil. evil and taking advantage of people in many ways. And we are going to a better system that is going to be full of good people helping other good people to get further in life. So, Charlie said before that for us to go to that system, 4 things have to happen. He said, first, we're going to have riots. And what was that? BLM, all these others that George Soros, hired a lot of those people to cause these events. Then we have to. The Queen's gonna die. He said that 2 years before the Queen died. Okay. He also said that Biden needs to be removed. All right, and so we're in transition of that right now. And so we have to have all these things happen before we go to the new system. And it's already in place. Like I said, we have another guy that's going to be talking about BRICS, so I don't want to hit on that too hard. But BRICS is India, China, Russia, and
it's BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South
Yeah.
Africa.
And Saudi Arabia also.
Well, the founding nations are those 5 or 6, and now it's ballooned
and
to
there's
60
like
countries.
60 other countries. You can look it up. So they're all operating on this system already. They had the system going. They were testing it out first, seeing if it's working well, and it's working really well. And so we're all on that system, and that's where the dollar is not going to be where it is anymore. We're still going to. I wouldn't say that as far as being scared, but things are changing. And Charlie states that our currencies are going to be equal. That's what's fair, right? So when you go to Mexico, you change your dollar, you get 1,000 pesos or whatever it is, right? So we're going to have more equal in that. So just hitting on that some more with the BRICS system. So if you look into Iraq right now, that is also a big country to follow. They have one of the biggest banks that are that's building there, that's developing there right now. And so they actually go on a currency called an Iraqi dinar. Probably a lot of people have heard of that. Probably heard of that in the past. I've heard other people, I've been collecting Iraqi dinar for 20 years, things like that. So I have some Iraqi dinar, and they said that's going to be one of the first currencies that goes to that comes out to the public, that it's more even with the rest of the currencies. So, we talk about all this. The more you know, the more you could try to take advantage of what's going to happen, right? And I just like to know. I like to know the truth. A lot of people can't handle the truth, but I like to know it. I like to talk about it, and I like to converse on radio shows with Chris about it, so we can help each other and learn more and try to prepare, But I think, just preparing individually is, I do real estate, so I own real estate. I own gold and silver. I own some Iraqi dinar. I try to diversify, right, for what's coming. And then I just go work hard every day. So, at the end of the day, like I said, it's much bigger than just the currencies that we're talking about. This is a world change. So, you do good to others, it's going to come back to you, right? You do bad, it's going to come back to you. So that's the basis of all of this right now.
All right, so let me give a little summary here. So, we have been fed since the beginning of time that the world currency has to be the U.S. dollar, and that the U.S. dollar, if it's not the world currency, world backing currency, then we're going to be in a bad way, and that's true. But at the same time, other countries have a right. They're sovereign countries, and they have a right to attain their own currency, because what's happening is by us being the standard currency for the world, it allows us to be the welfare queen. And I'm not blaming the American people. I'm blaming the American political class. And what I mean is that because our currency is the world standard currency, it allows them to print in epic proportions, which allows the United States to feed our welfare state, which of course needs to go away. We need a productive state, not a welfare state. But it also allows the U.S. to feed this war machine, okay? And we're funding these wars that are vicious and bloody around the world, and it's largely done because the U.S. dollar is the worldwide currency. And so What happened is in the past, there would be supposed bad guys. We were always told that they were bad guys because the banker class owns the media. The banker class, they own Harvard University. So we were told that these supposed bad guys were bad guys, right? And who am I talking about? I'm talking about men like Saddam Hussein, okay? Men like Muammar Gaddafi, men like Bashir al-Assad. And these men were supposedly the worst men of the world, and we were told these vicious stories about them. But we now know that there is such a thing as the fake press, and the fake press will do whatever it's told. It's just a puppet on a string. And so we don't know if these stories are true. So now everyone's beginning to question, were these guys really the bad guys? And I don't know if they were. But what I do know is nearly each and every one of them was attempting to get its own currency off the ground. It was trying to get its own currency off the ground to counter the enslavement system that is the US dollar. Okay, that's what I know. And I know that when you do that, you are literally, you're going for the Achilles heel, the true vulnerability of the banker class, and they're not going to let it happen. So if any leader out there in any sovereign country around the world gets that bright idea, bad things are going to happen to that person. But something's changed, and this is where Charlie Ward is going. See, something's changed because all of a sudden, BRICS started. BRICS was Britain, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And these countries came together and they said, we're not afraid of the banker class. We're going to start our own individual currencies. We're going to do it in a pact amongst our countries, and we're going to build from there. And now that BRICS has started, BRICS is as big as 60 countries wide. Okay. And so the question becomes, where men before tried to do this, like, for example, Muammar Gaddafi, Bashir al-Assad, and they were, taken out or whatever. How are these countries able to go ahead and build this alliance of self-producing currencies? That's and what Charlie Ward is saying is that the reason that this is happening is because BRICS is really the quantum financial system. Charlie Ward is taking it to a theoretical end as something that's not established yet and saying what you're seeing in its full formation will be a digital currency. And one of the things that Nathan said is that what the banker class always does is they tell us that we should compare our currency versus other currencies in the world, and that is a gauge of our economy. But the truth is, our currency versus other currencies in the world it's not the real dictating factor. When we look at our currency, we should be saying, how many loaves of bread can I buy with that dollar, right? And the banker class doesn't want that analysis going because they're robbing us blind. So they say, well, look at how the dollar is to the yen and this, that, and the other, and they keep us constantly off base. And so what Nathan was saying is that all fluctuations in currency between trading nations, that's going to be eradicated. This ability that you can, make money by trading in guessing the game and all that stuff, it's going to go away. And again, these are just one man's theory. Okay, this is not proven. But when BRICS comes together and forms an alliance that appears to be doing that, and that is bona fide news, then people start to look at Charlie Ward's theories and say, okay, maybe this makes sense. It ultimately culminates in what's called the quantum financial system. And again, we don't know if this is true, but it's just simply an extension of BRICS with a different name. And should this happen, that means the debt enslavement will go away. It seems surreal. It seems hard to believe. But certainly you cannot look away from what's happening with BRICS. And with that being said, G2 is on the line. G2, we gave a lot. I'd like to hear your opinion on what we said and on, I know you studied up on BRICS. Let us know what you're thinking.
Well, it's an interesting day to be talking about BRICS. Azerbaijan has announced that it is applying to be a new member of BRICS. So at this point, I think it's about 60% of the world's oil reserves that are held by BRICS countries. And so it's a major producer in the oil fields. Azerbaijan, of course, has an oil industry as well. They have a presence in that industry. So you're just adding to the power that they have in the oil market. It is obviously a threat to the entire system that is based on the U.S. dollar to say that these nations, this growing list of nations led by some of the largest economies in the world, is simply stepping away from the system dominated by the United States currency, obviously the world's reserve currency, the IMF, the World Bank, and the central banks from the Western nations, that they're stepping away from that system, which has been under such complete control, at least since World War II, and creating a parallel system that is not subject to, for example, punishment by the United States government when you do something they don't like. You may remember a couple of years ago, the U.S. got involved in using economic sanctions to try to punish an African country, I think it was Uganda, because they didn't like a law they passed about homosexuality. So here the United States was taking its position as the holder of the world's reserve currency and using it to attack another nation based on social issues that Uganda didn't think the United States really had any reason to be expressing a voice in. When you abuse power like that, when you use power beyond what it is designed to be and what would be appropriate, obviously the other side has a choice: submit or try to walk away. And as we have used sanctions for years to try to impose our will on countries around the world, they've simply gotten tired of having the United States dollar used as a weapon against them. So as commodities like oil and food and other commodities begin to be traded in contracts nominated in other than dollar currency, in either Chinese currency or one of the other currencies, Saudi currency, as that begins to happen, the world's demand for the U.S. dollar begins to shift. The supply of those dollars begins to shift as those countries no longer need to hold dollars in reserve because they're not trading in dollars, they're not holding debt in dollars. They may begin then to free those dollars up to flow back into the market. This is one of the potentially significant pressures that could come to bear on the United States dollar that could drive an inflationary momentum of the sort we've never seen. I mean, we're talking about inflation now where the government has raised rates, or the Fed has raised rates to try to stop inflation, all the while the government's been spending money so fast that they're driving inflation. So it's one foot on the brake and one foot on the gas. Now you've got yet another actor out there, an actor that has never before had an impact, that's saying, listen, we're not going to play your dollar game anymore. As they're doing that, and as the government continues to spend irresponsible amounts of money, the Fed is now talking about rate cuts. Well, if you do rate cuts while spending excessive amounts of money and watching BRICS slowly begin to move away, it's going to take time for BRICS to exit the dollar world. That can press us ever closer to hyperinflation. And when we hit hyperinflation, the system becomes stressed beyond anything that the American people have seen before. So I think that we're in a really delicate time, and I think the people that are leading our government are radical ideologues focused on this woke ideology and this globalist dogma, this idea that sovereign nations are a problem and that borders should come down, that populations should be able to migrate freely without respect to any nation's laws or needs, that nations don't really have a right to make their own decisions. If you're talking about something relative to a pandemic or climate issues, those matters should be decided by a centralized government. You've got this globalist cabal that takes that position, and they seek to undermine the United States as an independent nation. Now, unfortunately, they control our government right now. So I think we're in really delicate waters. These are dangerous times, and I don't think it's crystal clear which way everything falls out. No one can see that with perfect clarity, the timing and the direction of everything. But it is absolutely clear that we are facing significant geopolitical and financial challenges that this globalist woke cabal that controls the United States is simply not prepared to deal with and will not deal with from the perspective of the needs of the American people. Rather, they will deal with it from the perspective of woke globalists.
Well, I think it's interesting, we have all of these countries finding their sovereignty for the first time ever, but, everyone needs to understand that this battle between the people and the banker class did not start today. It didn't start this week. It didn't start in our lifetimes. It started a long time ago. And if you go ahead and look at the assassinations in U.S. history, they all have some tie to the banker class. So, like, for example, if you look at Andrew Jackson, President Andrew Jackson around 1820, he shut down the second U.S. national bank. It was the National Bank of the United States, and then he paid off our debt. He gave the American people financial freedom, and there was an assassination attempt on him. A gunman confronted him with two guns, both jammed. By the grace of God, the man lived. But then you move on. You move on to John F. Kennedy, right? John F. Kennedy was talking about issuing silver currency. He was talking about secret societies and things of that sort. And we know what happened to John F. Kennedy. Before him, Abraham Lincoln. He issued greenbacks, and greenbacks were a credible currency that was debt-free and that would stand up that the bankers didn't have control off. We know what happened to to President Lincoln. You look at William McKinley. William McKinley was a nationalist like President Trump. His campaign, like Trump's, was called America First. And he was a staunch opponent of the banker class. And what happened with him, like a number before him, was he ate a bad bowl of soup, and then the doctors took care of him, at the bedside. And so, and this is just a short handful of them. But so that raises the question, when you hear stories about, like, for example, Idi Amin in Uganda, we hear that this man was a tyrannical dictator, all this stuff. It just makes you wonder, was he those things, or was he taking on the banker class? What do you think, G2?
Well, it's hard to say. I think he probably has taken on the banker class. I mean, I think there is a large and growing group of people in the country who understand that this cabal of the central banks and the banks that are investors in the central banks and the uber wealthy, the ultra wealthy people who control them, are operating in their own self-interest and not in the interest of the nations they theoretically serve with these central banks. So if you're going to take on the central bank, you're taking on something different than the U.S. A lot of folks still think that the central bank, the Fed, is a U.S. government institution. Of course, it is not. It's an independent entity that is owned by banks and investors. It is not a U.S. government agency. So when you think about that, think about the idea that the Fed controls our interest rates. With the Treasury, they control our money supply. They make these decisions that have significant impacts on quite literally every home in America, every family, every citizen in this country. And yet, that's a completely independent entity that does not answer to the American people. And then you begin to see the cycle of bust and boom that the Fed causes, and the way in each cycle, and each bust and each boom, you see wealth aggregation move more and more to a more and more concentrated position in that ultra wealthy population. It's clear the Fed isn't working. First of all, it is not apolitical. It is absolutely a political organization that is working to support its globalist political ideology. It is also not working on behalf of the American people in this fantasy that they're chasing a 2% inflation rate. The Fed works on its own agenda. So you'll see when governments, when politicians are in charge who are tightening or who are, let's say, following the Fed program, the national or the globalist agenda the Fed laid out, you'll see that the Fed tightens or loosens monetary policy to support that group. When someone begins to implement a new administration comes in and begins to implement policies that the Fed doesn't like, they immediately begin tightening and trying to cause a recession. So it's just crystal clear. This group works for itself. It is independent. It is owned by those outside the government. It has some quasi-official relationship to the government, but it's never been audited. No one knows what's in the Fed, really. And if you're going to go into a position where you are counter to the Fed's policy goals, counter to the political aspirations the Fed has, then you're taking on the Fed. And that is a very dangerous thing to do.
You were going to say, Nathan?
I just wanted to add that bring this to today's level where we're at today and how we know we're going to a different system. It's going to hurt before it gets better, right? They say the system has to come to a stop, and then we go to the new system. And how can we tell that? Well, we can tell that a lot of people are hurting. Inflation, people, you can look up stats. People are behind on their car notes, behind on mortgages more than they have been in the past. And so this just shows you that we are getting closer to move into this new system, and how much we need it, because people are, because of the inflation and the struggling that's going on, we definitely need to go to this new system, and hopefully it's very soon.
So the scam that the central bankers always play on the people is they deprive the economy of a currency so that the economy implodes. I'll give you one example. It was called the Currency Act. It was pre-United States in the colonies, in the time of the colonies. And what happened is that the people were trading on a fiat dollar, which means a dollar that is not backed by a precious metal. But they didn't overprint the dollar, nor did they underprint the dollar. It wasn't called a dollar. I don't know what it was called, but they didn't overprint or underprint that unit of currency. And what happened is Benjamin Franklin visited King George, and the colony was just flourishing. I mean, the standard of living was incredible compared to Great Britain, compared to the other colonies. And it was because our pre-founders, they understood, we cannot screw with the currency or people are going to get hurt. So what the banker class did, this is what they did. So what they did is they made sure that there was not enough gold in the colonies, and then they had King George implement the Currency Act. And what the Currency Act said is, hey, we can't have this fiat currency anymore. You have to back it by gold. And he did that knowing that there was no gold, because if there was gold, then the founders, they would have backed the currency with gold. So he set them up. So, of course, there was no gold, so there was very little currency to print. And so the colonies imploded, and that actually set in the impetus of the starting of the Revolutionary War that led to, well, like I said, eventually turned out in our favor. So it's the boom bust cycle. It's the scam done by these early, like I said, in the early bankers, the banker class. It's the scam that they run. But I want to make this clear again. It's called the Federal Reserve. Today, this scam has bloated up into what's called the Federal Reserve. And I went to a graduate school on the East Coast, and when I was there, they treated the Federal Reserve as if it was the gold standard, right? Back then, it was Alan Greenspan and Ben Bernanke were running the Federal Reserve, and it was almost as if you couldn't say anything bad about them when they spoke. It was almost religious. You couldn't question them, and it was this scam that the banker class did, because these guys that run the Federal Reserve, they're nothing but a bunch of Tony Sopranos. They're nothing more than Paulie and Tony, but they have a better vocabulary and they wear more expensive suits. But they're nothing more than Paulie and Tony on The Sopranos, okay? And they had all of us in the business schools totally programmed to listen to whatever they said. But again, what the Federal Reserve is a national bank, and they have control not of just the supply of money in the United States, but in the world, okay? So they have all of the people in the world enslaved. And so, for example, when you see different parts of the world, for example, maybe the Philippines or China, they have a lower standard of living. It's because the feds jerry-rigging the strings to make sure that certain people are more enslaved than others, okay? It's not right. And that's why this new creation called BRICS has formed, where essentially you have these nationalist leaders like Vladimir Putin, President Putin in Russia, Prime Minister Modi in India, and others who've risen up to challenge the Fed, to bully the bully. And where we are now, just to give you an idea where this is at, the leverage that the Federal Reserve has over the world is in buying oil from Saudi Arabia, and it is by law that the Saudis cannot do trade when they're buying and selling oil in any other currency other than U.S. dollars. So that allows that monopolistic effect to have presence over the entire world. The Fed is in charge. They are just counting their money, rich like no one could ever imagine, because we're all buying oil with their dollars. But see, something that happened now with this new BRICS movement, what happened is things are really happening. India went to Saudi Arabia, and they were able to negotiate so that the Saudis would begin selling oil in Indian rupees. They will take Indian rupees for oil. Now, this is just a pinprick. This is just the tip of the iceberg. But if this gets momentum, it is doomsday for the Fed. Another very big momentous movement against the Federal Reserve is Mexico joined BRICS. As I understand it, Mexico has joined BRICS. That's a very large country. They want to get out of their third world standard status. That's why they're doing these things. And so it's really momentous times, and I agree with G2. We don't know what the truth is. We don't know what the future is. Charlie Ward has one theory that this is going to go in our favor. But things do have a tendency to turn and go against us, and the Federal Reserve is not a group that you want to mess with. They always have some sort of plan B. We don't know what plan B is yet, but in my opinion, even though life is tough right now, I just went to the grocery store, got a can of Coke for $1.79. I want everyone to understand this. I just bought a can of Diet Coke for $1.79. Less than 4 years ago, that same can of Diet Coke was 69 cents. That's more than 100% growth in less than 4 years. This is unsustainable. It's unsustainable. People cannot continue on this. That's why everyone needs to take stock in this, and we need to begin employing our Texas Democrats in this effort to take on the Fed. I want everyone to pick a Texas Democrat and call them and just say, end the Fed. Just say to them, what are you doing to end the Fed? Nathan, what do you think? What do you think the next step should be?
Well, I just want to hit on a few things Chris said about how the Federal Reserve is not just for the U.S., it is worldwide. And some of the things you can look into, just look at China. Evergreen is pretty much their biggest company in that country. And
Evergreen is a transportation company with the container ships. We see them everywhere.
Yeah, they're everywhere. They're here in Texas. I mean, they're everywhere. But they are failing. They are failing. Their biggest company. Okay? So we're not just feeling the pain here. Everyone's feeling it all over the world. And So I mean, we have to regroup. We have to, encourage our politicians, the ones that are actually helping us, like the Ron Pauls, his son Rand Paul. He's still in government, and we just have to go local. Galveston's 15 minutes from me, so that's local for me. We just have to go support those people, and I have definitely supported Ron Paul in the past. Your question was, where should we go next with?
Well, I think you kind of answered that. Yeah, I mean, we're in a time of uncertainty.
Yeah.
G2, I said earlier that there's been some big things moving in favor of BRICS. For example, the Saudis are now taking rupees for purchase of oil. I believe that Mexico has joined BRICS. What do you think? Like, do you have some other developments that are in BRICS' favor, or do you see anything going against it?
I don't see anything other than, it is somewhat of an economic war, right? So you've got the Western nations that are allied around the United States dollar, where the central banks are all intent on maintaining their influence and control. And now you've got this breakaway group that actually just started out as a grouping of countries that was used in an analysis done by financial analysts at Goldman Sachs. And eventually that group became an alliance and adopted the name that he created in his report. So, it's been a sort of recent development, but they're growing very, very quickly. And again, Azerbaijan today is saying they want to get involved. Azerbaijan is very rich in oil and minerals. It's got a lot of resources. And so more and more countries joining BRICS is something the U.S. may not have any power to stop because those are countries that, for whatever reason, are already moving away from the United States. Even some, like Saudi, who are very close historical allies, but do not want to be subject to U.S. domination. So I don't know that there's going to be a lot the United States can do to stop this. I think the best thing the U.S. can do right now is begin shoring up the institutions of international trade. There was a move made by the Democrat administration, the Harris administration, the Harris-Biden administration here, and I lead with her because obviously he's no longer in control. Not that he ever was, but the Biden-Harris administration decided to take assets that were in Western banks that were belonging to oligarchs in Russia and give them to Ukraine. Now, the concept of even talking about that is a violation of all of the rules that have managed our financial institutions and financial system for many decades. So when you do that, when you start saying those kinds of things, these oligarchs say, why would I put my money back in a Western bank? This is, should they do this, this is a really significant attack on our financial system by ourselves, by our own country. So I don't see anything that's going to stop BRICS other than a more rational, well-managed United States, and a United States that decides to be a different kind of player in the global trade arena.
And I just want to I know we're getting close on time here, but I just want to be quick on this. As far as the BRICS nation, there are states in the U.S. that have applied the country of Texas has also applied. The reason I say that is because we have such a robust economy in Texas. That's why everybody's moving here.
Wait. Did you say the state of Texas
Yes.
has applied to BRICS?
Yes, and there's other states that have also. Yes,
Wow.
They haven't necessarily been accepted yet, but they have applied. Right, and so yeah, I mean, all the big movers and shakers, Texas being one of them, and conservative states and just people that have a big economy are moving towards, they see the new system because they see this one crashing fast.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a massive period of uncertainty. I think G2 has established it. There's not much confidence that we could put in the dollar. I mean, it was set up on a fraudulent system to begin with, and it is just being abused. And by the way the currency works...
Well, I'm not sure it was set up on a fraudulent system, but it's been abused, and it even got so bad that this petrodollar agreement that the Saudis had with the United States that was 50 years old and up for renewal was not renewed. Saudi Arabia decided not to renew that petrodollar agreement, which again helps build the shift or support the shift away from the dollar into trading in other currencies. These are all just very bad moves, and the reaction from the United States on Saudi not extending the petrodollar agreement was, well, nothing. No reaction of any kind that was really meaningful. I'm sure there were discussions in back rooms, but in the end, Saudi's joining BRICS.
Well, when I said it was a fraudulent system, what I was referring to is that it's a debt-based currency. And so, I mean, if you look at what the early founders did, is a debt-based currency means with every note that's issued, if the bankers issue you a note for $1, you owe them $1 plus interest in so much time. Just so people, as a means of living, just like you have to breathe air, you have to conduct trade. It's just a matter of life. And what the banker class did is they established it so that they get to issue the notes, and the notes are debt-based. That means that it's issued in the form of a loan with interest. And of course, it's been certainly taken way out of whack. It's a setup to fail from the beginning, and now we're watching that happen. So G2, man, tell me what you think. What should be, Nathan gave his 2 cents on what needs to happen as a local citizen listening to this show. My message is constant. Call your Texas Democrats. But what do you think the people should do to prep for this financially as well as politically?
I think it's very difficult to prep for this financially, and I think this is a situation where people really need to stop and talk to their financial advisors and talk to experts in the field and try to form up a plan that really works for them. But there's no doubt that the system that we've been using is under incredible pressure and is likely to change. I don't think it's possible to very clearly and perfectly predict what's going to happen. We're currently living in a world of a sort none of us have lived in before. We've never been in a world where there was a BRICS, where China had a huge economy like this that was both strong in some ways and destabilized in others, as you made earlier in your point, where some of the large companies in China are stumbling, like Evergrande. If you remember that one from a couple of years ago, they defaulted on $300 billion worth of debt, and the Chinese government had to put tanks around their building, and they were in the real estate sector. And since that time, China's begun knocking down unused apartment buildings that were never occupied, brand new, tall buildings. Multi-floor, high-density housing that is being knocked over because there's simply no one to buy them, no one to buy or rent the units. So you've got a situation just with China that's never existed before. We've got a situation with the EU where you've got the southern states drawing off the wealth of the northern states, and you've got unrest in France, unrest in England, complete social change, even in Sweden, in some cities like Malmo. You've got transitioning cultures there, and really it doesn't seem that anyone's in particular control of how that goes. You've got this fractional reserve system that you mentioned a moment ago that is under stress as the dollar may get pressure not to be the world reserve currency. Again, I don't think that happens overnight, but it's clear there's momentum, and there are a lot of very powerful countries with a lot of natural resources and technology that are moving that direction. I mean, let's face it, we don't make iPhones in the United States, but people use cell phones every day. Well, where do we get them? Well, 90% of them are made in China and maybe 10% in India now. or some percent, 1% in India, they're coming from the BRICS countries. We are wholly dependent upon BRICS countries for a lot of manufactured goods, every computer we use, pharmaceuticals, healthcare safety equipment. We're dependent upon BRICS countries for lots of things. Well, the United States has never been in a position where it's been so desperately dependent on its economic competitors who are literally moving away from their partnerships with the United States. Perpetual trade deficits. This is a situation no one in this world has faced before. And it's really time to start taking a firm assessment, a careful assessment of what all of these various factors mean. And, of course, the most important thing people should do is vote. And if anyone who votes for this globalist cabal that has been in power for the last 4 years to continue is asking for more of this global stress, more war, more economic unrest. Those that want to see the sound policies that were in place from 17, 18, and 19 restored have a clear choice to go the Trump route. So there's a clear, very binary choice to make right now. And, everything from foreign policy to fiscal policy to monetary policy is at a breaking point. So we either choose a new direction or we get very quickly to a point where the debt and the global response to the endless sanctions and other activities are going to result in a permanent change for the United States where we lose significant geopolitical economic power.
So I'm going to bring this show right to a head and explain exactly how this is hitting the average everyday listener. And if you listen to CNN or whatever corporate media show, they're only the talking pieces of the bankers, and they will tell you that inflation's at 8 or 9%. It's complete nonsense. You can go on Facebook, and there are people or other social media, and they're everyday people. And what they do is they're calculating their grocery store receipts from today to 4 years ago, and they're showing inflation of over 100%. Okay, I think it's even considerably over 100%. And so what I'm trying to say is that, if you are tired of these endless prices, if you're tired of being a gerbil on a wheel, going from paycheck to paycheck, the whole system's built against us. But see, there is one thing: we still have the First Amendment. You still have your ability to go out and petition your government. And again, at the local level is where you're going to have the greatest impact. Imagine if every county across America, the hundreds and hundreds of counties, imagine if every citizen began to confront their county officials about these issues, and we turned the country's population against the banker class in a politically active way, in a peaceful way, and we took back our country. That's what needs to happen. And this is the Chris Heasley Show, and I want to thank my guest, Nathan Haley, talking to us about the quantum financial system. That was very, very interesting. And I want to thank G2 for his international perspectives on BRICS and monetary policy across the world. So, and with that being said, I appreciate everyone. You have a great week. We'll see you next week.